So, I was sitting in a meeting yesterday with five physicians. And we were discussing some of what we want to do in naturopathic medicine, which is to keep alive the traditional ideas and practices of naturopathic medicine in the face of the changes that are going on in the profession. And I was surprised to hear each of those people say in one way or another, not so many words, but in the same way, every one of them said at some point in the discussion, I don't consider myself to be doing anything extraordinary or different or out of the box than what I was taught, but I'm getting extraordinary results because I'm using these simple concepts. That's what philosophy is all about. Why philosophy? Why do you want to talk about philosophy? What's the whole point of philosophy? The whole point of philosophy is the way you see the world, or the way you think you see the world. And what's been happening, I think, for a lot of us, and this is true in all of the colleges, and I think it's also true professionally, that somehow over the years, philosophy has taken this back seat to a conversation about science, as if philosophy is something that is separate from or discussed outside of polite company. It's somewhere over here in the philosophy club, or somewhere over there in that course, when in fact philosophy informs everything that you do. You have a philosophy about everything in your life. If I say to somebody in this room, if I ask one of you to sleep with me, and you're single or married, gay or straight, and you say yes, I know something about your personal philosophy. If you say no, I know something about your personal philosophy, and I don't have to ask any more questions. If you think Barack Obama is one of the best presidents that we've had, at least in the last 2 decades, or if you think he's moving us towards a socialist nation, I know something about your personal philosophy. You don't have to explain it to me. All you have to do is utter that sentence or answer that question. If we have a discussion about abortion, and you come down on one side or the other, I know something about what you believe and how you see the world in the way that you have answered the question, or in the way that you have engaged yourself or in the discussion. And so it is with medicine, so it is with life, so it is with everything that we do. What we do, the way we conduct our lives, and the way, in this case, we conduct our interaction with a patient, and our expected outcomes depends on what we think medicine is. Now, unfortunately, that's not my stuff. This has been written about over and over again for the last 2,000 years. There's a doctor at Yale, can't think of his first name off the top of my head, Pellegrino, who writes extensively about this, and he says in many of his essays what I just said. I just quoted it. What a doctor does depends on what he thinks disease is. So, philosophy is our attempt to codify or articulate or understand just what our belief system is. The word itself, philosophy, derives from, anybody know? The Greek, meaning philosophy. Philo means what? Give me a hint. Philadelphia, philanthropy, hydrophilic, acidophilus. Phil means to like or to love or to be attracted. Okay? And Sophie or Sophia. Anybody? Wisdom, knowledge. So philosophy is the love of the study of knowledge. philosophy is that branch of inquiry that is, quote, searching for the truth. And what is the truth? Well, in the sciences, truth is thought of as that which is true over and over again, that which we can reproduce again and again and again and again. Or to say it differently, it's a way of describing the behavior of nature. The books that I'm going to refer to and the books that I've taught out of at Southwest and the other schools are mainly James Tyler Kemp's Lectures on Homeopathic Philosophy and Henry Lindlar, Nature Cure, which was first published in 1911, republished several times after that, and it's been reprinted many times in the 20th century under different names. The most recent revision was called Philosophy of Natural Therapeutics, based on Lindlar's work. However, the revising editor left out a number of chapters from the original work. So you have to bear that in mind. If you can find the original Nature Cure from 1911 or 1913, you've got the whole of it.
You can get it on Google Books for free.
Google Books for free?
For free. You can download it.
Okay. Nature Cure?
Nature Cure.
Okay, there we go. Now, Kemp's lectures on homeopathic philosophy are based on Hahnemann's Organon, the Organon of medicine. And the most frequently used edition of the Organon is the 6th edition, which Hahnemann had, what's the word I want to say, updated before his death. So it's the most mature of his writings on this subject as well. So much of what I want to talk to you about for the rest of the day is not my stuff, it's their stuff, and I think I'm translating it or conveying it pretty accurate. First of all, when each of these authors starts writing about medicine, they start with the same question that Lindlar raises. Now, this is from chapter 4. Actually, it's from chapter 3 in Nature Cure, or it's from chapter 4 in the Revised Philosophy. And what he says is, well, bear with me here. In our study of the cause and the character of disease, we must endeavor to begin at the beginning. Imagine that. And that is life itself. For the processes of health and disease and cure are manifestations of that which we call life, vitality, life's elements. While endeavoring to fathom the mystery of life, we soon realize that we are dealing with an ultimate, which no human mind is capable of solving or explaining. We can study and understand life only in its manifestations, not in its origin or its real essence. Now here's where the rubber meets the road. There are two prevalent but widely differing conceptions of life, or the nature of vital force, the material and the vital. The former looks upon life or vital force with all its physical, mental, and psychical phenomena as manifestations of the electrical, magnetic, and physiochemical activities of the material or the physical material elements composing the human organism. I'm going to read that sentence again. Now, this is, remember, from 1911. This is 100 years ago. The former looks upon life or vital force with all its physical, mental, and psychical phenomena as the manifestations of the electric, magnetic, and physiochemical activities of the physical, material elements composing the human organism. From this viewpoint, life is a sort of spontaneous combustion, or, as one scientist expresses it, a succession of fermentations or chemical changes. That's the basis of the scientific materialism of the 20th century. That's the argument that we all crawled out of the primordial soup, that the phenomenon of life can be explained by a couple of molecules that got together and had such a great time that they invited their friends, and it got more and more complicated and more sophisticated to the point where we can make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and fly 747s, all crawling out of the primordial soup. The vitalistic conception of life, on the other hand, regards vital force as the primary force of all forces, coming from the great central source of all life. This force, which permeates, heats, and animates the entire created universe, is an expression of the divine intelligence and the will, the logos, the word of the great creative intelligence. It is the divine energy which sets in motion the worlds in the ether, the electric corpuscles that make up the atoms and the elements of matter. These electrons, by the way, this is at the time electricity was being discovered, and it was a new phenomenon. These electrons are positive and negative forms of electricity. Electricity is a form of energy. It is intelligent energy. Otherwise, it could not act with the same wonderful precision in the atoms, in the electrons of the atoms, as in the suns and the planets of the sidereal universe. This intelligent energy can have but one source, the will and the intelligence of the Creator. Or, as Swedenborg expresses it, the great central sun of the universe. If this supreme energy should withdraw its creative energy, the electric charges, forms of energy, and with it the atoms, the elements, and the entire material universe would disappear in a flash of a moment. From this, it appears that crude matter, instead of being the source of all life and its complicated mental and spiritual phenomenon, which assumption on the face of it is absurd, is but an expression of the life force, itself a manifestation of the great creative intelligence, which some call God, others nature, the oversoul, Brahma, Prana, the Great Spirit, etc., each according to his best understanding. It is this supreme intelligence and power acting in and through every atom, molecule, and cell in the human body, which is the true healer, the vis medicatrix natura, which always endeavors to repair, to heal, and to restore the perfect type. All that the physician can do is to remove obstructions and establish normal surroundings within and around the patient so that the healer within can do his work to the best advantage. So that sounds perhaps a little complicated or a lot like poppycock, but there are two extremely different worldviews here. Again, the one some people call bottom-up creation, the other one's called top-down. Bottom-up meaning that we crawled out of the primordial soup and that we get more and more complicated life forms until we reach the point where we are now, where we can make laptops and 747s, and let's say. This is the same worldview that says that consciousness and search for meaning, for a creator, is itself an emergent phenomenon of the physical material universe that becomes more complicated. The other view suggests the materialistic or the material viewpoint here is that we have this spontaneous generation, we have the primordial soup, we have the theory of evolution, we have these different things that explain how physical matter gets more and more complicated and survives in a more and more complicated form, and consciousness, and again, the search for meaning, the search for a creator, the search for understanding is an emergent phenomenon of that physical universe. The other phenomenon suggests exactly the opposite. It suggests that Lindmar says here that the vital force, whatever that is, precedes everything. That there's something greater than us, there's something greater than the physical, there's something intelligent that exists prior to the physical universe. And the physical universe and us and all the rest of the physical stuff on the planet are manifestations of that prior intelligence, or that prior blueprint, or that prior consciousness. Now, those two things can't meet. It's either one or the other. And what you understand it to be determines what you think life is about, and in the discussion at hand, determines what you think health and disease and healing are all about. If, in fact, nature is intelligent and conscious, we can see that there is some knowable way of understanding or working with nature and being part of that process. Or let me say it a different way. Well, in the conventional world, we're taught that nature is like random and malignant and without purpose. And in a more vitalistic model, nature is intelligent and purposeful and benign. Well, if nature is intelligent and purposeful and benign, we ought to be able to understand a little bit about what she's doing and be able to describe what is happening there. And in the sciences, that's thought of as laws. There are laws of nature. There are laws of chemistry. There are laws of motion. There are laws of aerodynamics. There are laws of physics that are an attempt to explain how things work on the physical level in an orderly way, in a rational way. And what Lindmar and others will argue is that there are also, that the phenomenon of life is governed by certain laws as well, just as surely as health and disease, which are expressions of life, are also governed by those laws. And they're easily knowable and observable if you know how to look for them and you know how to talk about them. Now, the other paired qualities that are used to describe this material versus vital, which are not exactly synonymous, grow out of the Greek philosophical schools, which were known as empiricism and rationalism. And the difference there is this, in a nutshell, in the thumbnail sketch. The empiricist keeps doing things over and over again to see how it works out. We know how things work because we keep doing it and we see what happens. The rationalist, on the other hand, understands that there's some principles at work that are knowable a priori and therefore can predict what's going to happen without having to do it. A stupid example is the laws of motion. Newton tells us that something at rest stays at rest, something in motion stays in motion, and there's an equal and opposite reaction for every action. That sounds like, we take that for granted today, but that was groundbreaking information when Newton articulated what was observed in the nature of motion. And it's from those simple laws that the mathematics of transport and aerodynamics and everything else in our culture flows. Little did Newton know when he was talking about that we'd get to the moon and back. But without knowing what he articulated, we wouldn't have got it. But given those laws, for example, if you drive a car at 50 miles an hour into a brick wall, something's going to happen. Now, if you don't know the laws of motion, and you don't understand the laws of motion, you're going to have to drive the car into the wall over and over again to see if it happens over and over again. But once you realize that that's what's happening, once you articulate that, once you say that, wow, every time I do this, this happens, and you formulate the observation that this is what's happening, you don't have to keep doing it. I can now tell you if you try to climb into a brick wall, what's going to happen in the car and the wall. And the same phenomenon should apply to health and healing. There are predictable rules, there are predictable laws that are in operation all the time. We don't have to guess about what's going to happen when we're intervening with patients. We don't have to guess about the outcome. We already know what it's going to be. Then, of course, we can control the variables. So, to get there, though, for me to help you articulate those laws, we have to go back to some definitions that grow out of the philosophical model that I'm talking about. So the first place we go is the definition of health. Oh, by the way, I should probably talk about this for a minute, too. The assumptions that are made in the one world are totally different than the assumptions that are made in this other world. These different assumptions or worldviews can be referred to as paradigms. Now, those of you who have heard me talk about this before, bear with me, because some of you probably have not. A paradigm is the way we look at something. A paradigm is our worldview. It's the way we understand something. That term was introduced to our culture by Thomas Kuhn in 1967 with the publication of a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Kuhn was a student of physics who became enamored with the history of physics and then the history of science, and turned his attention to studying that instead. And what he suggests in this landmark book of his is that if you try to understand the evolution of scientific thought along a linear path, as you were taught in school, it can't be done. There is no linear growth of scientific thought. But rather, there's a linear growth where ideas and concepts are built on the former thinking to a point. And that point is the point which is the end of the growth or the point of limitation of the currently in vogue model of reality, the current paradigm. When you start developing information or having experiences that do not fit into the current paradigm, you can only do one of two things. You can dismiss the information as being faulty. That didn't really happen. That's not possible. Or you have to start to question your paradigm. You have to start to question the way you think about the world. The classic example that Kuhn uses is the flat Earth and the round. Okay? When the Earth was flat, and for all intents and purposes, the Earth was flat. See, when your experience of the Earth is as far as you can walk, or ride a horse, or maybe even a stagecoach, the Earth is flat. And the idea that the Earth is round is of no consequence or relevance whatsoever. So, as people began to experience life on Earth, it was, for all practical purposes, flat. As you know, we're told that somewhere along the line people start realizing that, I shouldn't say realize, start wondering whether the Earth is flat. Not because they have some epiphany and a dream about the world being round, but because the data that they're collecting, the information that they're getting, the experiences that they're having, cannot be explained in any reasonable way if the Earth is flat. How do you explain a curved horizon? How do you explain heavenly bodies returning over and over again, and so on and so forth? Unless you start thinking, well, maybe the world's not flat. Maybe there's something else going on here. Maybe it's spiritual. Or maybe it's not. Well, the people who first start doing that, the people who first start changing the paradigm, the people who first start saying, no, it's not what you think it is. There's something else going on here. Maybe the earth is round. Those people, in every science, in every paradigm shift, those people get excommunicated from the church, they get burned at the stake, they get trotted off to the funny farm, they lose their grant money. Depends on what period of history you're talking about. And medicine is full of these, as is all the other sciences. Some of them are very famous and very well-known persons, like Paracelsus, like Hahnemann, like Harvey, like Jenner, like Semmelweis. They come up with a different way of understanding things and a different way of thinking about the universe and a different paradigm, and they're ostracized. These are well-known, famous, top-of-the-game physicians who are ostracized and whose lives are ruined because they dare challenge the prevailing paradigm. Further, in this paradigm thing, by the way, I should say that we use that word paradigm a lot now. People say, we need to think of new paradigm. That's not the problem. By which they mean, we need to think outside the box. A paradigm shift is not thinking outside the box. A paradigm shift is a completely different view of the world. If you're thinking outside the box, you can still see the box. You're in the same old paradigm. You're in the box paradigm, right? When you get to the new paradigm, there ain't no box. But, says Kuhn, there's a real problem here, which is that, and this, as a naturopathic student or doctor, this is absolutely critical for you to get. There is no way, says Kuhn, there is no way to communicate across paradigms. It's not possible. There are two reasons why it's not possible. The first has to do with, I suppose you'd say, understanding or cognition that goes like this. If you understand the old paradigm, we'll call it the flat earth paradigm, and now you understand the new paradigm, then obviously you understand the old paradigm because now you understand the new paradigm because you were there and now you're here, right? You could look back and say, oh yeah. But if you're in the old paradigm and you don't understand the new paradigm, you can't understand the new paradigm because if you could understand the new paradigm, you'd be in the new paradigm. Are you there? You with me? Once you get here, you understand both. But if you're not here, you can't understand both because if you could, you would. Everybody with me on that? Furthermore, at the time of a paradigm shift, there's no language for the new paradigm. Because the language that's been spoken in the culture or the science is the language of the old paradigm. So now we have to take words from this paradigm, use them over here to mean something similar, but not exactly. Examples from medicine are mind-body. What the? In this paradigm, there's a mind and a body. They're separate from each other. They describe those words describe two different phenomena. In fact, on the medicine side, we have a doctor for the mind and we have doctors for the body. We have drugs for the mind, we have drugs for the body. We have diagnoses for mental illness, we have diagnoses for physical illness. Over here, where we see the human being as a whole ecosystem, we have no word to describe that phenomenon. So we try to get to it by using the concept of mind and body and sticking it together with a hyphen. But it means so much more than mind-body that it really doesn't mean anything. Because we're still thinking about those words from the whole paradigm. So we're stuck on two counts. We're stuck because if we don't understand the new framework or the new paradigm, we can't get there. And if we don't have the language, we're even further handicapped. Now, this is not just intellectual poppycock. This has profound implications. Profound implications for you as students in medicine. Profound implications for our culture. Profound implications for you as a physician and a human being. Because when you change the way you look at the world, you just change the world. When you change the way you look at the world, you have changed the world. Using the example from Kuhn, when you change the way you look at the earth, you have just changed everything. There are things possible now that were not possible before. Classic example, again, take it from this analogy, is when you decide that the earth is round, you can sail all the way to the west to get to the east. You can circumnavigate the globe. But you couldn't do that yesterday because you'd fall off the end or off the edge. And think about this for a second. The earth did not change. The objective reality, whatever that is, if there is such as objective reality, I'm not sure that there is because we're uncounting. But if there is such a thing as objective reality, it hasn't changed. Or this is for Consciousness Evolution 101, or did it? Okay? But let's assume for a minute that it didn't. Let's assume that what changed was the way we look at it. Actually, either way, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because now we can do things that we couldn't do before. A whole new world of possibilities opens up because we're living in a whole new world. When you understand the paradigm of vitalism, you realize that there's a whole lot of things that are possible in human potential and human medicine, in the relevant case for us, that weren't possible when you lived in the scientific material world of the last century or so. So, that's what I want to explore with you. It's a brand new world. And that brand new world has nothing whatever to do with conventional medicine or the way it's practiced in our culture. The two don't even meet. There's no common place. There's no meeting ground. This is why, in my opinion, and that of most of my contemporaries, as I was looking in the mirror the other day, I realized that most of my contemporaries are postmenopausal now, including myself, which is no surprise. I didn't think I was there yet. Anyway, most of my contemporaries would tell you that this is why there's no such thing as integrated medicine. Because if you understand vitalism, which is the mother of naturopathy and naturopathic thinking, it's almost impossible to go back to the flat earth. And you can't be in the middle. Because see, when you're in the middle, when you mix the two, when you try to hybridize two different ideas or two different approaches which are diametrically opposed to each other, you get something less than either one. This is a personal comment here, a personal commentary. The naturopathic physician who's trying to do conventional medicine is not doing as good a job at conventional medicine as the allopath. And the allopath who's trying to do naturopathic medicine is not doing as good a job as a competent naturopath. So everybody loses. The practitioner loses, the patient loses, the outcomes are less potentially beneficial, and so on. I once heard somebody say we need plurality in medicine, or in the practice of medicine, for the same reason we need diversity in the gene pool. You start hybridizing everything, you've got nothing left. except for a lesser, less effective, and in the case of the gene pool, a less vigorous species. So anyway, I need to know what time it is. Is there? Okay, so I brought up Broadwell to tell you this. Dr. Broadwell said to our class over and over again, this is a direct quote, so forgive my French. The mind can only absorb what the ass can endure. Okay? So if you're sitting there thinking about your butt getting sore, it's time to take a break. Right? So you just stand up and move around for a second. Just stand up and move your body.